Judaism believes in peace, and Judaism believes in war. That's a fact. Our main ideal, we all know as Jews, is peace. I want to share some of that with you today, but also the Torah of war. That's a fact. And we represent, as Jews, a revolution in antiquity and in Western culture, which in many respects we've been very successful with. In antiquity, the foundation stone of Western culture in many ways is Greece. And I just gave you here from the 6th century BCE, very simple quote: war is the father and king of all. Into the 19th century, there was still a view called militarism that basically championed the idea of going to war. War got rid of internal divisions. War consolidated people together. War helped the economy, even though obviously fewer people working, but industry thrown into battle creates more patriotism. A lot of values up to the 19th century. This was literally an ideal in some countries, militarism. The Torah does not stand for that, of course, but we're a revolution in that regard. And to recognize that is to appreciate what we're confronting right now in the world. We are confronting the reality that our way of life in Western culture has, in many respects, taken root, namely peace as a value. But it wasn't always so. Not in ancient Greece, where the main thing was not to live, but if one was going to die in glory and the like. Glory be all the warriors, etc. Look at how many national anthems of the world have to do with war, including that of the United States of America. It's honorable, it's glorious, whatever it is. That's not our way. It never has been, and it will not be, and it shouldn't be even now. But we consider this reality. We enter into a what would I call it? We would enter into just a greater perspective on appreciating what is actually at stake for us now, and to recognize that the fact that we have so many supporters within Western culture didn't have to be that way either. And I would submit that it actually has to do with the victory of the worldview of the Torah, as against the backdrop of against the backdrop of another type of worldview, again, which had staying power into the 19th century as something to be celebrated and championed, and that is certainly not our way. To begin with, that is to see this the first piece after the quote from ancient Greece. I'll put it on the screen. It's from a book by Shimon Federbush called Mishpat HaMelucha B'Yisrael, and it talks about war and Judaism. And this, of course, is the first installment of a series that I'm going to be doing now, probably over many weeks, about war, Judaism, and the Torah's view of war, carrying the Sefer Torah onto the battlefield. And the first point to make is that I'll show it to you now, put it on the screen. We waged war against war. Hamilchama neged hamilchama, writes Federbush, hitchila be'emet b'Yisrael. The Jewish people brought to the world the idea of waging war against the concept of war. Im nasim lev l'chol ha'aflaga b'shevach hamilchama sheshara ba'olam ha'atik. Look at how much exaggerated praise existed in antiquity regarding war. Navin et godol hachidush hamabchani, the great novel revolution of the Torah, shia b'ti'uv hamilchama b'torat hayadut, that we find war, according to the Torah, to be abominable, disgusting, sometimes necessary, but not an ideal. And the idea that we have, of course, of falling all over ourselves to push forward the idea that we have a vision of world peace. In antiquity, idolatrous cultures were so often about creating a whole culture around sanctification of war. Nesta emunat hayichud haivrit legorem machriyat sheshlidat hamilchama. We were always opposed to war, in principle. Right? And I'm not going to read the whole thing, but you can read it for yourself if you're familiar with the Hebrew. But he goes on to say, if you're going to look at the way in which peace advanced in the world, you will see that the more that it became more defined as a value that there should be peace, so too there was also more of a striking down of roots. That was also taking root. And what we believe is that there is one God, and that God wants peace in the world. That all humanity are children of God. That the belief in one Father in heaven, common one, obligates us in the idea that there should be brotherhood among all humanity. That is our value. That's what we seek. And the idea of there being a universal God, he writes, itself brings us the recognition about the unity of humanity. We're created from Adam and Chava, from common parents, and that's deliberate, right? It's meant to destroy the tribal view that sees war and conquest as some kind of a value. And this is a surprising idea. He writes toward the end, not only do we have this as morality for the Jews, we feel this is the international morality that ought to endure. Just think of the fact that outside of Dag Hammarskjöld Plaza, sometimes people view it ironically, but at the United Nations headquarters in New York, it's a quote from the book of Yeshaya, of Isaiah. Etc. To beat their swords with the plowshares and the pruning hooks will come about from the spears. Even on an individual level. Hare noldu ele mitoch hergesh hativi shishtatfik b'tzar hazulat mibli lihitromem l'rayon ahavat habriot muchleta klulav mitzvat v'ahavt l'recha kamocha. If there is a constant of mercy and of charity and of kindness toward the other, it comes from the fact that there's a kinship between us and that other individual in most of antiquity. In Judaism, we have the mitzvah of love thy neighbor as thyself, and it is the very fact of there being a fellow that warrants a mitzvot of caring for the other. By dint of them being your fellow, that's enough right there. Not just the empathic concerns and that which should flow from the obligation to look out for the ulam kibush ruchani gadol mizeh b'Torah Yisrael haya galuya rayon masrihenu az shim b'chasim ben shvatiyim yitzor v'chavei b'ikarim shnidvut v'chased. It used to be that the only notion of caring for the other was if you're my kin, but if you're not, a war against you. I could care less what happens to you. That's not the Jewish view. Jewish view has a very universal flair to it. Va'ad hayom harei nir'eh sherav ha'amim hamodim b'yesodot hamusarim ben adam l're'eu kofrim l'ma'aseh b'musar medini ma shenira lahem l'rishut ben ish la'amito nechshav b'eineim l'davar mutar v'gam ratzu b'yachas im echad l'sheni. Right? The idea that there should be some universal concept seems to be in short supply, he says, basically, outside of our world, meaning there are many who just feel it's about me and us and could care less about anyone else. That's not the Torah's way. The Torah has specifically a very universal view. To state the obvious, on the next page, to remind ourselves, at times like this, challenging times like this, our messianic vision is that the wolf will dwell with the lamb, that the leopard will be with the kid, and that the small calf will be together with the young lion, and the small child will be leading them along, right? And it goes on. The cow and the bear, they'll be grazing together, right? The lion together with the cattle, they'll all be eating straw, and the child will be able to play on the python or the viper's hole, right? They'll be able to play there. Why? Because there will not be any evil. There will not be destruction of my entire holy mountain, for the whole of the earth will be filled with the knowledge of God as the waters cover the seas. That's our view. That's our view. It's not about the Jews. It's about everybody. The Rambam explains this not just in terms of, as others wanted to explain, a change in the fabric of the cosmos, that foundationally animals will no longer be predatory. He understood this as a mashal, an allegory about the nations of the world. Al ya'aleh al halev, I have the bottom underneath it if you want to see it on the sheet. You can read it with me, the Hebrew, my loose translation. Al ya'aleh al halev should be mot Mashiach, yibatel davar min hagol shel olam, oshiyah sham chidush b'maseh bereshit. Do not imagine, says the Rambam, that's his view, that in the Messianic era, somehow the world will no longer work as it does now, that the laws of nature will be suspended, there'll be some kind of something new in how creation functions. Ella olam kiminago noheg. The world will continue exactly as it is now. It is an allegory and a riddle. Inyana davar sheyu Yisrael yoshvin levetach im rishei akum hamishulim kize'ev v'namer. The Jewish people will live in peace and with security with the wicked ones of the nations of the world, the idolaters of the world, who are considered like the wolves and the leopards. Shinamar ze'ev aravot yishadadem v'namer shoked al arehem. Proof text to back it up. V'yachzru kulum ladat hayamet. They all come, they all return to the true religion, which, by the way, does not mean everyone will be Jewish. But instead of idolatry, they'll believe in one God, recognizing even at this challenging moment of the 8.1 billion people on planet Earth, over 4.6 billion of them believe in one regard or another in one God. Right? They may have issues with what's called shituf. They have other beliefs of other elements within God and not the total unity of God. But the basic gist of it they got, and others who do understand that there is only one God. So we're on the road there, even at this challenging time. Yeah. But these nations will no longer engage in thievery or destruction. They'll eat, they'll consume that which is permissible peaceably with the Jewish people. And that lion, like the cattle, will be grazing. You wait and see, says when Mashiach comes, you'll see. Mashiach will arrive, that's what's going to happen. There'll be world peace. World peace. Not the Jews win and everybody else loses. Not that the nations of the world are destroyed. Not hellfires. Not what I don't know what other religions have in their books. In Judaism, we're going to live together. That's the view. That's the vision. And not everyone's converting to Judaism in our utopic vision. Many non-Jews that I interact with are so surprised or shocked. It's not our worldview. We're not converting anybody to Judaism. 7 basic Noahide principles, which probably most of Western culture is already abiding by right now. And I've been conscious of it. Just doing it. They have to be aware. Oh, by the way, the Sheva Mitzvah B'nai Noach. But that's not today's class. We don't have time to read the whole, the second halacha. I give you just an excerpt from it. The Chachamim say that Ein Bain Yemot HaMashiach, the Olam Hazeh and Yemot HaMashiach, now versus the Messianic era, except for one thing: Shibud Malchio Bilvad, the subjugation by the nations of the world. That's what will be different for the Jewish people and therefore in the world. And he does say that at the beginning of, based on the Nevi'im, we would have read it this year if not for the configuration of how the holiday fell out this year of Sukkot. Would have been Shabbat Chol HaMoed. There'll be a war called the War of Gog and Magog. And let me check your impulse right now to think to yourself, maybe this is Gog and Magog, maybe. But before you get too excited about it, many times in Jewish history, unfortunately, Jewish people looked in Sefer Yechezkel and decided it's Gog and Magog. We should be a little bit humble before we think we know the interpretations of Tanakh. This is it. This is it. This is it. I'd be wary and just cautious about such language, and also because the description of what happens in Milchemet Gog and Magog, if you ever looked it up, is quite scary. It's quite scary. Okay. Also, it mentions that before Gog and Magog happens, so there'll be a Navi will come to straighten out the Jewish people and to prepare their hearts. Lachin libam, and that's Hinei Anochi Sholech Chemet Eliyah Hanavi, etc. And that's that his role will come to the world, particularly for one function: Lasum Shalom Ba'olam, to bring peace to the world. Ve'ishiv Leiv Avot Al Banim, beginning with families, maybe beginning with the Jewish nation, and moving from there. There's more here, but for want of time, I won't read it inside. You're welcome to look it up for yourself in the Hebrew. So all of this, a vision of peace. It is our vision. We believe in it. We seek it. It's what Judaism stands for. It's our vision. It's our mission. It's what we would like to see in the end of time. And we should understand that Western culture did not have to develop that way. In my view, for what it's worth, it is an absolute triumph of the words of the prophets of Israel from the Hebrew Bible that have made inroads into other aspects and elements of Western culture that got it to be emblazoned on the wall of the United Nations. So often it is made a mockery in the United Nations, as we know. Let the most recent days be sad proof once again of how upside down it is. Not for naught that the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, on Simchas Torah. Simchas Torah, I think it was 1986, had a meeting with the United Nations, Israel's representative of the United Nations. His name was Benjamin Netanyahu. And Benjamin Netanyahu, then Israel's representative of the United Nations, came to visit with the Lubavitcher Rebbe to get a bracha from him before he would begin his job. And what did the Rebbe tell him? You are about to go into a hall of darkness, but you're going to light a little light. And when you light a little light in a hall of darkness, you can light up the whole place. And I said, that's his bracha to you. He said, that's my bracha to you. We're still waiting for the fulfillment of the bracha, but we have the mission and the marching orders from the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, of sacred blessed memory, who passed away physically from the world in 1993, which puts to bed anyone who thought that maybe it was possible for him to be the Mashiach. He cannot be, according to the halacha. But he set a path for us, as did many other Rebbeim, of what we need to do now, which is to light some light in dark halls. For all of that, we should recognize that there were times that Jews had to go to war, but it came at a cost, a corrosive cost to their own ability to be engaged then in building the Jewish state, building the Malchut Yisrael and its crowning gem, which of course is the temple itself, the Beit HaMikdash in Yerushalayim Yer HaKodesh, She'yibana b'meher b'meinu b'yimot HaMashiach. And so we have David speaking to his son, a father giving his son a charge before he leaves the world. Vayomer David li Shlomo beno. He said to his son, li Shlomo, sorry, that's the Ketiv. It's written beno, but you should read it as Beni, my son, my boy. He's talking to his son. Ani hayayim levavi livnot bayit l'shem Hashem Elokai. In my heart, I wanted to build a house for the sake of God, Hashem, my God. Vayhi alai dvar Hashem lemor dam larov shafach u'milchamot gedolot asita lo tivneh bayit lishmi ki damim rabim shafachta artz lefanai. I'm sorry that Hashem tells David HaMelech. We do not hear this, by the way, in the book of Shmuel, in the book of Samuel, 2 Samuel, Shmuel bet, this doesn't appear. But we find out now at the end of his life, David says to Shlomo, by the way, this was also spoken to me. It was just not recorded earlier. He tells his son that Hashem told him, you spilled too much blood. You fought too many wars. And therefore you cannot build a house in my name and for my name because you caused too much blood to be spilled. It was justified. He was the king of Israel. He was the commander in chief. He was the Ramatkal of the Tzava before he handed over to Yoav ben Tzeruya. But that is a reality, and it came at a cost to his own ability to be associated with the house that was meant to be and is still meant to be associated with peace. Hinei ve'nolad lach, Hashem told him, you'll have a son. I'll allow him to have peace in his time from all of his enemies. Misaviv, they're all around him. Kishlomo yeshmo. His name will be Shlomo, and I will give peace and tranquility upon the Jewish people in his days. Hu yivneh bayit lishmi, v'yeh li levein v'ani lo la'av, v'achino tikisei malchuto al Yisrael ad olam. He will build the house for my name. He will be like a son. He will be like my son, and I will be like his father. All right? Meaning, David is saying to Shlomo, I want you to realize I'm not going to live forever. But you have an Avinu Shebashamayim, is still your father. As David HaMelech himself writes in Tehillim Chav Zayin, Ki avi v'imi azavuni v'Hashem ya'asfeni. My father and my mother abandoned me, and God has gathered me in. How come? Because when the mother and the father take their child to the Bakum, that's the place where the Jewish children in Eretz Yisrael go to be inducted, Lihid Gayes, to become part of Tzahal. The parents understand Hashem has to take care of them. It's a way that is beyond the reach of the parents. And we have to daven for that as well, especially now. And therefore, David says to his Shlomo, listen to what Hashem told me to tell you. That son of yours, Shlomo, will be like a son to me. And it's also to remind him that you'll have a connection to Hashem. That is a very, very strong connection. Ata b'ni, and now my son, Yehi Hashem imach, v'hitzlachtu v'anita beit Hashem elokecha kasher diber alecha. This is the bracha. That's the bracha. Hashem should be with you. You should have success, have atzlacha, right? You're going to build this house exactly as he said to you. Ach, yitein lecha Hashem seichel v'ina v'yitzavcha al Yisrael v'lishmor Torah Hashem lekecha. He's going to give you seichel and bina. You should have proper intellect and understanding, and he'll command you with regard to the Jewish people to guard the Torah of Hashem, your God. Az tatzliach. That's how you'll be successful. In tishmor l'asor chukim v'mishpat sh'rotziva Hashem et Moshe al Yisrael. How will you be successful? If you guard to fulfill the edicts and the statutes, which Hashem has commanded Moshe upon the Jewish people. And note the two words over here at the end of his life, Chazak ve'ematz. What David Malka Mashiach writes in Sefer Tehillim Bapiruch HaKodesh, that David Malka Mashiach learns from Yeshua Binun, that he hears from HaKodesh Baruch Hu after Moshe Rabbeinu passes away. What does Hashem say to Yeshua Binun? Chazak ve'ematz, repeatedly. So what does David say to his son? You imagine with his hands on his son's head, he's giving him this bracha. Tell the Jewish people they have to keep the mitzvahs, and they have to follow it, and then you'll have Hatzlacha. And also, Chazak ve'ematz, al tirav, al techat. Don't be afraid and do not relent. V'hinei bo'oni achinoti l'beit Hashem zahav kikar mea elef v'chesef elef alafim kikarim v'lan choshev la barzel ein mishkal ki l'rov haya ve'etzim v'avanim achinoti v'aleihem tosif. What did he do? What did David tell his son? I prepared in my poverty, in my onyi is merely my suffering, because I knew I couldn't build it. What did I do? I prepared all the materials. Everything's ready. You just have to build it together, right? You have to build it. So just look here about all the materials that are here. I'm going to repeat this many times in shul the next few weeks, so you'll forgive me. It'll be like a rerun. What's the name of the operation going on now? Charvot barzel. The barzel makes a cherev. The sword is made of iron. The iron from the iron dome, the iron from the iron sword will soon be made into the iron that will be in the building of the Bayit Shlishi. It's right over here. A few weeks ago in August, late August, early September, in Elul, it was September already, I was visited by Rabbi Ari Katz from the Yeshivat Hesder in Sderot. He bought me a present. What did he bring me? He wanted me to have it. He said, I want you to have, this is a mezuzah that was made out of the metal from the iron dome. We took the pieces from the iron dome and we made this. I said to him, what about there's a menorah that's made from the enemy's rockets. He said, yeah, that's that. For the mezuzahs, Shomer Dal Tot Yisrael, we had the artist, he decided to take the metal from the iron dome from Kipat Barzel, and he made it into the covering for the mezuzah. That's what David HaMelech says to his son. There'll come a time you're going to build a Beit HaMikdash. You're going to use the Barzel that's already prepared. You're not going to do it by yourself. You have a lot of helpers. The people who are the hewers of wood, and the people who are going to be involved with stonework, with gemstones, the people who, right? Everyone who's wise to do all this work. Get up and do it. Hashem will be with you. Okay, and you hear that? What a bracha. David HaMelech to Shlomo HaMelech. There's a corrosive element to war, though. It comes upon us, and we see it has a certain price that's paid. You can't be the one after to build the Beis HaMikdash after that happens. What can you do? Someone else will have to do it. There'll be a next generation. They'll have to be the ones to build it. Why? There's nothing you can do. Sometimes that's what happens. In our tradition, God's name is Shalom. And there's a halacha psuka, the Gemara in Masechet Shabbat describes that if a person was in the restroom, one is not allowed to say shalom to somebody else. Why can't you say shalom? Ein sham she'elat shalom. Messiah Rav Himnuna mishmei de'ula de'amar asur la'adam shitin sham l'chaver beit merchatz. Can't do it in the bathhouse, and also not in the bathroom. Mishum shenemar vayikra lo Hashem shalom. God's name is peace. Literally, we consider God's name peace, not victory, not war, it's peace. Ella me'ata. Himnuta nami aser l'memer beta kise. So according to that logic, you can't say the word faith in the restroom. Dichtiv hakel haneman, because the pasuk that refers to God as the faithful God. Right? V'chitem hachinami. If you're going to say that that's true, Amarava bar machase amarav chama bar guria amarav shari l'memer himnuta beveta kise. No, you can't say the word faith. Why? Because hatam with the word faith is an adjective. He's the God of faith. Hatam, with regard to faith, Akel HaNe'eman means sham hatam shem gufelu ikrihachi. Dimitargamidan Elah mehemna. The Aramaic translation of the words Hakel HaNe'eman, the faithful God, is Eloka mehemna, the faithful God. It's an adjective. Hacha, with regard to the word shalom, shem gufei ikre shalom dichtiv vayikra lo Hashem shalom. God's name is peace. It's the embodiment of peace. And we should understand that even at a time of war, that this is not our ideal. We don't want this. We don't seek this. In antiquity, until the 19th century, there was a view of militarism that was vaunted, and Judaism stood against that. But Judaism also stands against the modern, postmodern idea now of the other Western extreme of pacifism. One of the greatest makorot on this comes from George Orwell, a time, in many ways, not unlike our own. Pacifism and the War, 1942. Dramatic reading, Tzvi Engel. Pacifism. Pacifism is objectively pro-fascist. That is elementary common sense. If you hamper the war effort of one side, you automatically help that of the other. Nor is there any real way of remaining outside such a war as the present one. In practice, he that is not with me is against me. The idea that you can somehow remain aloof from and superior to the struggle while living on food, which British sailors have to risk their lives to bring you, is a bourgeois illusion bred of money and security. Mr. Savage, another interlocutor in his War of Ideas, remarks that according to this type of reasoning, a German or Japanese pacifist would be objectively pro-British. But of course he would be. That is why pacifist activities are not permitted in those countries. In both of them, the penalty is, or can be, beheading. While both the Germans and the Japanese do all they can to encourage the spread of pacifism in British and American territories. The Germans even run a spurious freedom station, which serves out pacifist propaganda indistinguishable from that of the PPU. They would stimulate pacifism in Russia as well, if they could. But in that case, they have tougher babies to deal with. 1942 was after the von Ribbentrop Pact was violated, right? After the Operation Reinhard to go into Eastern Europe. This is already 42. So that's what he's talking about, yeah? Insofar as it takes effect at all, pacifist propaganda can only be effective against those countries where a certain amount of freedom of speech is still permitted. In other words, it is helpful to totalitarianism. I am not interested in pacifism as a moral phenomenon. If Mr. Savage and others imagine that one can somehow overcome, in quotation marks, the German army by lying on one's back, let them go on imagining it. But let them also wonder occasionally whether this is not an illusion due to security, too much money, and a simple ignorance of the way in which things actually happen. As an ex-Indian civil servant, it makes me shout with laughter to hear, for instance, Gandhi named as an example of the success of nonviolence. As long as 20 years ago, it was cynically admitted in Anglo-Indian circles that Gandhi was very useful to the British government. So he will be to the Japanese if they get there. Despotic governments can stand, quote unquote, moral force till the cows come home. What they fear is physical force. But though not much interested in the theory of pacifism, I am interested in the psychological processes by which pacifists, who have started out with an alleged horror of violence, end up with a marked tendency to be fascinated by the success and power of Nazism. Even pacifists who wouldn't own to any such fascination are beginning to claim that a Nazi victory is desirable in itself. George Orwell, Pacifism and the War, first published in the Partisan Review in Great Britain, London, August, September, 1942 edition. Bayamim hahem uvazman hazeh. Let the call go out from all Jewish institutions, I mean real Jewish institutions, that there is a Jewish voice for peace. But the organization that calls itself a Jewish voice for peace is not truly about peace and is certainly not Jewish. Is it a voice? It certainly is a voice. A raspy voice that creates moral equivalencies and that is so mired in philosophical sophistry that it has gone down the road of Gandhi. But it's not Judaism. So said Gandhi himself in his biography, The Life of Mahatma Gandhi, by Louis Fisher, 1950 publication. And here's what Gandhi wrote, inaccurately, even on the facts, let alone on the philosophy. Hitler, Gandhi was quoted as saying, killed 5 million Jews. That is, of course, incorrect. It's much higher, even than 6 million. We just can't catalog beyond that, but okay. It is the greatest crime of our time. Here was Gandhi's view. But the Jews should have offered themselves to the butcher's knife. They should have thrown themselves into the sea from cliffs. As it is, they succumbed anyway in their millions. The quote is in the context of Gandhi's argument to his biographer that collective suicide would have been a heroic response that would have, quote, aroused the world and the people of Germany to Hitler's violence, end quote. Idolatry has not left the world. it turns out that the death cult exists even in so-called pacifists like Mahatma Gandhi. So we look to our Torah and we carry our Torah to the battlefield. And we take the rule, Maaseh Avot Siman Labanim, we take a page from our forebears to appreciate that Avraham Avinu is an Ish HaChesed. He's an Ish Shalom. But Avraham Avinu, when the time came, he marshaled an army and he fought a battle to save his own kin and others from captivity. It's in Parshat Lech Lecha, chapter 14 of the Hebrew Bible, in the book of Genesis, for those who want to look it up. Here it is, at least just excerpted in the Hebrew edition. Just to remind you, the story is one of world war, the first world war of antiquity. That's documented in the Torah. And that world war transpired between four extremely strong kings who lived in the Mesopotamian area of the world and came overland with their massive armies in order to attack five kings, chieftains really, who were in the environs of today's Sodom and Amorah, in the land of Israel, in order to put that down a rebellion that they had started. And on the way, they crushed everything in their path. The five kings, as they're known, from five smaller city-states, came out against the four. Who are the four? Those are the four against the five. They had to run away. Described the topography there. There were mud pits. And they had to run away, Melech Sodom and Amorah. Many fell, and those who were left, they ran up to the mountain range. You can find that mountain range. It's the hills of Judea till today. You can see it on a map. The four kings rather. They took all their food and all their property. They took Lot and all of Lot's property. He was the nephew of Avraham, and they went, and he had been living in Sodom previously. Vayavo Palid, a survivor, presumably from the war, that's the pshat, and he arrives. Vayaged Avram ha'ivri, I'm not going to the midrashim now. That's the survivor of what happened. Vayaged Avram ha'ivri, he said to Avram the Hebrew, I spoke about this in the Dvar Torah the other day from Washington. I'll send it out to the shul momentarily. I sent it to WhatsApp chat, the Divrei Torah Chizuk WhatsApp chat for those who are interested. Right? He's sitting in the plains of Mamre with his friends, Aner, Eshkol, and Mamre, his people of the covenant, and he learns this news. Vayishma Avram kinish ba'achiv vayarek et chanichav yulidei veito 18,300 vayirdof adan. He finds out the news, finds that his brother was taken captive, and he basically arms his people, his acolytes, his students, the people who live in his house. 318 soldiers arrayed against four massive armies that have just traveled overland with their weapons and their armaments. Rabim biad me'atim, Rishaim biad tzadikim, v'zeidim biad oskei toratecha. Vayachalek alehem laila, huva avadav, vayakem v'yidafim ad chuva shemismol Damasek. They chased them all the way up until they finally beat them all the way up north as they were going through their victory lap. Avraham and his 318 soldiers arrive. They capture them. And of course, I didn't give you the rest of the story here, but you know already. The Torah describes in longhand that he rescues Lot. He rescues his family. He rescues all of the people of these five villages, and he brings back all of their property. And more on that I'll speak about on Shabbat. But just to recognize, Avram doesn't go to the United Nations. Avram doesn't open the Siddur. I'm sure he was praying the whole time while he's running. He was probably saying the David Hashem Ori. I say that only halfway, tongue-in-cheek. He's saying, Esa ein Elahari me'ayin yovo Ezri. Ezri mim Hashem os Shemaim va'aretz. I'm sure he's saying, he did this. He didn't hesitate. He raised an army and he went. There was no mumbo-jumbo about being a pacifist. Rabbi Shalom Karmi, I've quoted many times, Yeshiva University likes to say, Judaism is pacific, but it is not pacifist. And there's a marked difference. We want peace. We sue for peace. We love peace. We dream about peace. We pray for peace. But when the day of the war comes, we do not hesitate. We raise an army and we go. And that's our moment. The Radak writes here on the next page, Kinish ba'achiv, he heard that his brother had been taken captive. Krovo, it was his relative. Uvnei achim hareim ke'achim. But your nephew is like your brother. As we learn later on in the Torah, as an uncle will say to his nephew, Ki anashim achim anachnu. He was his brother. Rabbeinu Bechaya points out, Umasha amar achiv, that it's his brother, V'haya ben Haran achiv, was really his nephew. Hodianu bezeh, yofi midato malato shel Avram. We learn here the greatness of the attribute, of the exalted attribute of Avram Avinu. You know why? Ki kinei el hadavar upana el achva. Because he was so zealous about this, to save his brother, that he went for brotherhood, and he championed that v'lo pana el hamariva shaya beinehem. In chapter 13 of the Hebrew Bible, in Perek Yud Gimel of Sefer Breshit, Avraham and Lot have a falling out, and they separate, and they go their separate ways, and they're not really in touch so much. But he heard that his brother was taken, and suddenly it was achim leneshek in another way. And he got up, as if he was literally his own brother. He put aside whatever the baggage was between them, and he understood what it means to get up and save your brother, regardless of what his mixed up priorities might have been 10 minutes ago. None of that matters. It's time to save the brothers and the sisters. Vayarik et chanichav. Rashi. Vayarik. Ketargumo. There's a little pay there. It's supposed to be a superscript, a footnote to another commentary. Forget it. Some of those get in here, right? Vizaris means he was with alacrity, with verve. He ran. I'm going to make it. It's going to be with verve. As dayin b'charbi aleichem. I, says God, will actually bring my sword, upon you. Defense. V'chein arik charbi. The enemy says, I'm going to sharpen my sword. That's what Paro said. Yeah. V'chein v'harek chanit v'sagor. Chanichav. It doesn't say chanichav, it says chanicho, right? In the singular, it's written in the singular, but we pronounce it in the plural, a Greek tiv. So Rashi very famously says, who did he take with him? Eliezer, right? Eliezer shechancho lemitzvot, right? Because he had trained him in mitzvahs. Eliezer went with them. According to the Pshat, there are 318 people with him. There's a beautiful medrash that the 318 really was one person, Eliezer, right? A beautiful idea. Why? Because the numerical value of the word Eliezer is 318. Now, there are many ways to understand what that means. You could take that medrash literally. That's one view. Another view is, what is the name of his servant? Who does he take with him? Eliezer. Melech Ozer, Umoshia, Umagen. Melech Ozer, Eliezer. That's his prayer. What did he take with him? His tefillah, Eliezer. God is my help. Shechancho lemitzvot. He trained someone in mitzvahs. The word chinuch means starting something into its service as the way of educating it, actually bashatach, in the field. When you bring something, some kind of a tool or instrument out into the field, it's hatchalat knisat adam. It's the person or the instrument bringing into shu atid la'amodba. That's going to cause you to be able to stand up. You're going to use that to stand. So you're taking it into battle. Vayarik et chanichav, vayarik et chanicho. That which he had trained, the one he had trained, he brought with him, or the ones he had trained, he brought with him. That's chanoch lanar. Educate the child means start training them, not by instructions in the classroom. It's not theoretical. Go, do. Chanukat HaMizbeach is not a song. Chanukat HaMizbeach is offering offerings. Chanukat HaBayit means Chanukat HaBayit David is the action of it, right? And what is it? Velaz, Korin Law? What is it? Velaz? Enseigner. En français, enseigner. Enseigner is to teach, is to instruct. But it's the manner of instruction that's not theoretical, but very practical. That's actually the doing. And here Rashi quotes, yeah. Just to consider what that means and what it augurs for us that we should be thinking about. About 5 minutes left. Let me telegraph the last piece over here. It's not just Avraham Avinu who went to war, but Avraham Avinu who also ends up making covenants with people later on in chapter 21. We'll get to that next week with Avimelech. And Avimelech tells him it's going to be a multi-generational covenant. The book of Breshit in the days of Yitzchak describes a very tense moment in the area, which today, by the way, it would be called the area of approximately Otef Aza, where Yitzchak Avinu is confronted by this king, and the king is very angry and he wants to chase him out and exile him. But they come after him, even after he leaves, they come after him again. Vayomer aleim Yitzchak, Madua batem elavetem sneitem oti, v'tishalchuni meitchem. You threw me out. You exiled me from the land where I was living, and you caused me to be pushed over. Now you came to find me. Vayomeru, what did they come to tell him? King Avimelech and his chief of staff. Vayomeru orainu ki Hashem haya Hashem imach. We see that God is with you. Vanomer tihina Allah benotenu beinenu uveinecha v'nichota britimach. We want to make a covenant, with you. There already was a covenant. We want to renew the covenant. Im tasei imanu ra'a kashol neganucha v'chasher asinu imcha rak tov unel shalichacha b'shalom ata baruch Hashem. We want to make a covenant with you that affirms that we've done right by you. We didn't do anything wrong to you. After they had all sorts of anti-Semitic canards against him, after they threw him out and told him go find somewhere else to live, now they want to make peace. He actually sat down and ate with them. Yitzchak wanted to make a deal because he wanted to have peace. The Ramban, right here, I gave it to you in the English as well, courtesy of the Chevelle edition. The Ramban writes regarding the Jewish people and war, V'itachein shaya Avram gadol me'od v'rav koach shayu b'veito 300 ish sholef cherev v'lo ba'alei brit rabim. Not only did he have 318 soldiers, he had many people who were the people of the covenant with him who went to battle with him. Who's that? 3 people who are not part of the covenant, but they made a covenant with him. Aner, Eshkol, and Mamre stood shoulder to shoulder Avraham Avinu when he went out to war. V'hu gam ben chayil asher libo kelev ha'aryeh v'radaf arba'a malachim giborim me'od v'nitzcham. And Avraham has the heart of a lion, and he chased after 4 mighty kings, and he beat them all. The head of the Philistines was very nervous. It would be easier for Avram now to conquer him than to take care of the 4 kings. So what did he do? He decided, I better make a covenant. That's chapter 21 of the Hebrew Bible. Again, in chapter 26, they're going even to Avram's son Yitzchak. They see also a mighty warrior. They want a peace treaty. Maybe they already also heard about the promise God gave Avraham, gave him the land of Israel. That's chapter 21. It would be a violation if they would go against King Avimelech. They made a covenant after all. He thought Avraham might stay alive till his grandson was alive. And like the deeds of the patriarchs, did their children also do? He was great like his father, as a warrior. He was worried what's going to be if Yitzchak raises an army like his father Avraham. After that war of rescue, that war not of conquest of territory, but of rescuing Lot and all the people from Sdom and Amorah, Adma, Tzvoyim, and Soar, after he brings them all back, after the end of the chapter, Achar Hadvarim Ha'elas is the Torah. Hayadvar Hashem el Avram b'machazeli mor. Hashem spoke to Avram in a vision. And what did he say to him? Al tira Avram, Anochi magen lach. Don't be afraid, Avram. I am your shield. Scharcha harbe ma'od. You have much reward awaiting you. Melech Ozer Umoshia Umagen Baruch Ata Hashem Magen Avraham comes from this pasuk. Magen Avraham. God is a shield of Avraham. Says Rashi, Achar Advar Ma'ela. Whenever it says the word Achar as opposed to Acharei, it means it's Samuch. As opposed to Acharei, which is Muflag, means it's against the backdrop of the last story. So chapter 14 was the war, 4 kings versus the 5 kings, and Avram saving the captives, bringing them back home. Chapter 15 happened right after it. He killed off all the kings. He thought to himself, maybe I spent all my credits of merit now. Maybe because I did this, there's nothing left. Whatever merit I had before God, I had to use to save my brother. You will not be punished for all of the souls that you had to kill. You didn't want it, you didn't seek it, but when the time came, you had to raise your weapons, and you did. Don't be afraid, Avram. I'm your shield in the battlefield. And whatever you have to do to win, you're going to do. And I will guide you, I will guard you. I'll put a little asterisk on what I'm quoting here. Subsequent sessions of our series here will be about the ethics and the morality from a halachic vantage point of how Judaism throughout the ages understands war in relation to Western culture's notions of just war theory, ethics in the battlefield, proportionality, civilians and populations. We have a lot to say on this subject as Jewish people, and I hope to present a Jewish voice for peace, a Torah voice for peace, which is not related at all to an organization that is perhaps financially sound, but morally bankrupt, that tries to appropriate that language for itself. God tells Avraham, don't worry. You're worried about getting reward? Don't worry, you're going to have a lot of reward. Now, I gave you as the last source for this morning, 2 Midrashim and Breshit Rabbah, which expands somewhat on what Rashi writes. Rashi, very often, just quoting the Medrash, but give you a window into the moral dimension that was understood by Chazal, according to our tradition, of what was going on for Avram, why he was afraid, and why God had to say to him, don't be afraid. First, Rabbi Levi Amar Tartin, Amri Chada. So we won't see all of them, we'll just see 2. Rabbi Levi Amar, Lefi Shaya Avram V'inu Mitpached Ve'omer, Tomar Otenu Chlusin Shaharagti, Shaya Behem Tzadik Echad, V'yirei Shamayim Echad. What if someone who I killed was actually really a righteous person? Are there not righteous people, even from the 4 kings? Even the most wicked nation, there's no righteous people? There must have been. Maybe I accidentally or inadvertently I had killed people who were innocent and maybe even righteous. Maybe. And that's one. So there's a whole piece here of an allegory. We don't have time for it because I really have to close the shiur. I want to leave some time for questions and comments once the shiur is done. But just bear with me 2 more minutes. There's a whole piece here. So that's one. Second, Rabbi Levi has another idea. Uchre has another idea. Lefi shehaya avinu Avram mitpached ve'omer tomar otan hamalachim sharagti shebeneim mekansin uchlusin ubain ve'osin milchama. I killed all sorts of the leadership of the enemy. But what happens if all of the populace who has not come out to war now decides they're going to band together and they want to come against me as the entire world, and they want to come down on me and try to make a war against me? Amar la Kadosh Baruch Hu. Hashem said to him, Al tira, Anochi Magen Lach. Maha Magen Hazeh, like this shield. Afil kol chorvot ba'ot aleh, even if all the swords of the world come against it. He omeret kenegdan, this shield that I'm telling you about, I am your shield, that the shield will stop it. Kach at, afil kol ovdei chachamim mitkansin alecha nilchem ani kenegdan. I will war against them, says Hashem. I will be your shield. I will be your shield. You do what you need to do. I'll protect you. I am going to indulge a third idea because it is actually here. And I think it's important. For Rabbanan Amrei Chada, Lefi Shaya Avram V'inu Mitpached V'omer Yoadet L'kiv Shnei Shnitzalti, L'radet L'milchem Amlachim Nitzalti, Tomer Shnit Kabalti Schari Ba'olam Hazeh, Ve'en Li Klum La'atid Lavo. I just want you to realize what this means. Avram was afraid because he said to himself, I've survived so many horrors already. I was put in a furnace and you saved me. They tried to burn me alive, which until very recently we thought was something that only barbarians from the Middle Ages could do. But now we saw there are barbarians today as well. But I was in that fiery furnace and you took me out. I went to a war against kings. I'm not a king. And I went to war against them. You saved me. Maybe I got everything I'm going to get. Yeah. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Al Tira Anochi Magin Lach. V'chol ma she'asiti imach b'olam hazeh, chinam asiti imach. V'ascharchem etukon la'atid lavo. Everything I did with you, I did gratis, says Hashem. But your real reward, that's waiting for the future. Yeah. Scharcha harbe me'od, your reward is great. Heich ma da'at amar, as it says in Tehillim chapter 31, Marav tuvcha asher tzafanta lire'echa. How great is the goodness that you have concealed for those who fear you. Today we learned about the idea of the Jewish people and war and peace. We talked about Avraham Avinu going to war to save his captive brother. And we dealt today with the 2 extremes, the Western extreme of antiquity, from ancient Greece until militarism of the 19th century, of militarism, and described the Torah revolution and our desire for peace, our drive for peace, our love for peace, our prayers for peace. And at the same time, to fight mightily against the Western extreme of our moment, de jour, of pacifism, of being a people that should sit idly by and watch innocent blood being shed and take no responsibility, or not to rise up. But lo zu haderech. We'll follow the derech of Avraham Avinu, who carried a Sefer Torah out onto the battlefield, who was worried about moral considerations, who needed reassurance from HaKadosh Baruch Hu when all was said and done. And Hashem told him, Al tira Avram, anochi magin lach, scharcha harbe meod. Let's take each of us a prayer from today. Melech ozer umoshia umagen baruch ata Hashem magen Avraham. Every man, woman, and child shall recite this daily, repeatedly in the Shemona Esrei, and should have in mind this is not just a prayer from the past, but a prayer for today and for tomorrow. Ad biat goel tzedek. Amen. Amen.